As you say that, we're all immigrants. I had traced my family tree back to not the Mayflower, but pretty darn close. And I had grown up in a town in Newton that was half Jewish and half Italian American. And, or for the most part, I guess there were those of us splattered in between that didn't fit into one of those two categories. And people were always asking me growing up, are you Italian? And I would say no. And they'd say, well, then what are you? And I'd say, oh, I'm English, Irish, and Scottish. And they'd look at me and say, are you sure? Well, I found out in my mid-20s through doing some research for my grandmother that I was in fact Greek, which is the immigrant in my story is Greek. And the way I found it out was my grandmother had been at assisted living, and she was telling me a story about when she was in grammar school. There was a man who used to sit on a swing and watch. She would be on the swing and he would be sitting on a bench watching her. And she always wondered if that was her dad. And it turned out that her father had left when she was 2, but she never knew why. And so through all the research that I was able to do, I was able to put together a nonfiction story for my family of who my great-grandfather was, where he had come from, where he went, and put that together in a nonfiction version. So I decided to make them up. And I wrote this book, The Immigrant's Wife, to fill in all the blanks for myself and tell the story of my great-grandfather, although it's almost completely fictionalized. In the book, he does leave for the same reason, and it's a good reason. You know, back in the day, it was, oh, they left and went and got milk and never came back. And that was not his story. He was not leaving for nefarious reasons. And so to be able to tell that side of the story, I've had a lot of men actually thank me for that they don't always just leave their families for, not good reasons. And to get that side of the story told seems to have meant a lot to a lot of men.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have another author with me today. And JB Harris is here with us. We're going to be talking about JB's books and her writing process. A lot of great stuff to happen here on the show today. So happy to have great authors on the podcast. And JB, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is great. We have a mutual contact. And you're going to be doing something pretty exciting with a guest from the show that's already been on. Kim was on the show and talked about her journey as an author. And the two of you are going to hit the road and do something fun and exciting as authors.
We are.
What are you going to do? What is it? Come on.
Well, we've decided to do a road trip from where she lives to about where I live. So she's in Montana. I'm actually in Massachusetts, but we're going to go a little further. We're going to drive from Montana all the way to Maine. And we're going to stop every day and try to hit one of the independent bookstores and one of the chain bookstores and do signings or readings or in conversations with along the way.
Wow. Now,
Yeah.
Okay, so is this a documented trip? Are we going to be able to follow the journey on social media or anything?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We will make sure that we post at every stop and thank people and say hello and let people know where we are and what we're doing.
Aren't you concerned, like, with the people lined up along the road with signs waving and flags as you come through their town? And they're like, it's the authors, right? It's going to happen, right?
If only. That would be fabulous.
I love it. Whose idea was this? Combined idea between the two of you? How did this come up?
I don't remember how it came up. I've been pounding the pavement with my own publicity since my book came out. And as one of the little guys, it's kind of hard to find different people who are willing to interview you and talk to you. So thank you again for having me here. And what I found is you seem to reach the most people at signings, but doing all the signings here in Massachusetts is great. It means more people in Massachusetts know who I am and what I've written, but no one in California or Canada or anywhere else knows who I am or what I've written. So it just occurred to me when she got published, she's going to want to do the same thing. And that we should try to do it in conjunction and just we're going to take 2 weeks and We're going to drive across the country.
Nice. That's super smart. I love it. We talked before we hit record that one of my past guests had something really exciting happen just by getting out there. It's really hard for authors to get the attention of the big guys and the big, media to support their books. And getting on a podcast is great. I love having you on. This is awesome. But I am not the big shots. Obviously, I'm here in my house. But they came on my show. We talked together and had a great conversation around her book. Encouraged her to start her own podcast because she's really amazing and really good at what she does. So started her own podcast. She got going with that, did some stuff on social media, continued as a podcast guest. And lo and behold, she sends me a link just a little while ago. And she's like, you wouldn't guess what happened. She said, somehow I caught the attention of the team at Kelly Clarkson. And she was the closing feature at the end of the episode where it's whatever catches Kelly's attention in social media, whatever. She came on and did a very short little interview, promoted her book, and Kelly loved what she does and what the book is about. And she's like, I don't have a big team. I don't have people doing this for me. It's just me being consistent and getting my stuff out there that you just never know. Right. And podcasting is the one thing I love is that anyone anywhere can hear this and be a part of this. And you never know whose team member will bring this to somebody in the team and go, we really need to talk to JB. Like, this is a really important author. We need to get them on the show. So I'm not promising that I have a direct connection with Kelly Clarkson by any means, but it's really interesting to know that as we're consistent, as we're promoting our work and getting out there as authors, that you just never know who's listening to you and to what you're doing. So be consistent and just the book tour, I think, is an awesome idea. I would also encourage you maybe to reach out to the local news agencies as you do that and let them know you're coming to town. And maybe they'll do a little feature on the two of you as well. It's a great idea.
I'm hoping it would be really neat.
It's a great idea. I love it.
The big guys get their book tours planned for them by whomever, and we just thought, why shouldn't we do it?
Just do it
yourself. Why not us, right?
I think it's a wonderful idea. What's the timing for the book tour? Did we cover that?
We didn't talk about that. We're actually leaving. Well, we were going to do it soon after her book came out, which is right now in January. I think her book came out 2 days ago. But then we decided that driving through the mountains of Montana may not be the best time of year to do that. So we are starting on the 20th of April and ending on the 5th of May.
Awesome. It's amazing. So who's the driver? Are you both driving?
Probably.
Okay.
A lot of driving, so we'll both probably switch off.
That's good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I'm planning the book stops and she's planning the hotel stops. So.
Well, I would love to follow that journey on social media and see you guys stopping, taking pictures at all the different cities and signs and places that are, people would identify and know, hey, I know that spot. It'd be kind of cool to see you with your books and traveling. It's a great idea.
I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. So we've talked about the fact that you're going to be promoting the book, but hey, let's talk about the book. What's the name of your book? And tell us a little bit more about what you're writing.
It's called The Immigrant's Wife. And I guess I'd qualify it as historical fiction. It was tough to decide how to qualify it. I'm fortunate enough that I know Christina Baker Klein a little bit. So I sent her an email and said, what do we even call this type of, genre? Because it's not just women's fiction. A lot of men are enjoying it. It's not just historical. It's really book club, but it's set in the past. So that's what she said to me to call it, book club set in the past. And it's the story of a 19-year-old woman in 1913 Boston who's middle class and falls in love with a 23-year-old Greek immigrant. And you can imagine that didn't go over so well back then. So they defy her parents and they buck society and they get married anyway. And then about a year into the marriage, he disappears. And Anna, the wife, does not know why, but the reader does because it's a dual point of view book. Mm-hmm. So you get to follow both their journeys as they overcome their struggles, as they give up everything, including each other, for their child.
Is that difficult to write a dual point of view book? Like, explain that to me. How do you do that as an author?
I found it difficult in the sense of having to flesh out two characters and make them both feel believable, real, and people you want to spend time with. But from the conceptual part of it, I find it easier because you can share things with the reader that you couldn't otherwise. So if I had Anna alone in Boston wondering where Charles was, you're going to miss so many rich scenes and things that he's struggling with, and then hear them sort of after the fact retellings, which I don't think is as engaging. So I just, I did a lot of drafts on this book, a lot. And a couple of them were fleshing out the different characters so that they were fun to spend some time with.
As an author, as you're writing, do you take liberties to drop in little nuggets and little things that are going to be a surprise and a delight for your readers that you can't wait for them to get to? Like chapter 4, oh, just wait till you find out what happens when he turns the corner. Like, is there stuff that you put in there that you can't wait for your reader to uncover?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I have my favorite scenes in my favorite chapters. But you want to make sure that there's not just too few of those. Yeah. Because if there's too few chapters that you really enjoy, then there's going to be too few chapters that your reader really enjoys. But yeah, there are definitely places I'm like, wait till you see what happens here.
Especially when somebody's talking to you and they're in chapter 3, but in chapter 4, there's a big twist. And you're like, oh, okay, enjoy chapter 3 because chapter 4, it's crazy. So you're like, I can't wait for you to get to chapter 4. We'll have a new conversation after you get to that point,
Exactly.
Yeah, that's amazing. So as you write the book, you find inspiration. I'm always curious about how authors kind of do their writing during the writing of the book, before, after, how you continue being progressive with your writing, how you keep that alive. One thing we talked about when we did our little pre-chat a while back was, for podcasting, we have a thing called National Podcast Post Month. NaPodPomo is the hashtag, where in November every year, podcasters do an episode every month or every day for the entire month of November. And it's a lot of work to do an episode every day. But this has been happening in authorship for a lot longer than podcasting, kind of this featured writing period. And you brought it up, and I'm so happy to hear that you talk about it. But what is it for authors that you guys do? And when is it? And tell us more about that as well.
So it's the same month. Okay. It's November, and it's National Novel Writing Month. So it's called NaNoWriMo. And the goal is to write, I think it's 50,000 words in a month. And, beginners need to beware. It's not, write it and you're done and send it out to agents and publishers and publish it. It's more trying to get I like to call it like the clay of the story. So you're throwing all the clay out there. So you have this sort of rough mold, and then you're going to spend your time revising, chipping away until you get the sculpture that's going to become your book.
That's a lot of words. Okay. So in perspective, like for podcasters, we do a podcast episode like maybe once a week, 52 podcasts a year. So to do, a bunch in 1 month is a lot of work. The amount of words that you're writing in a month, what would that translate to for a typical normal author kind of writing at a regular words per day or words per week? How long would it take to write that many words?
That's a tough question, because I don't think there is a typical author. Some people are writing after they get home from work. Some people, like myself, are fortunate enough that it is their work. I write about 500 to 1,000 words an hour. So, it could be anywhere from, 50 hours to 100 hours over the month. But I guess I should say I type about that. The idea of NaNoWriMo is just to keep typing and not to stop and think, really. But I think most of us stop and think. So you can stare at a page and, all your writing time is gone and all you've put down is one sentence. And that's what NaNoWriMo is trying to overcome. It's trying to get the editor out of your head and just get you writing.
So take us through an exercise. Like, what are you writing in those moments? Are you just kind of like, is it like a download of information? Or you just, whatever comes through your mind, you're just going to put it out? Are you self-editing while you're doing this? How's this happen for you?
When I'm doing it, and I've only successfully done it once. I try every year, but the other years I've been working on revisions and that sort of thing. So I'm an all or nothing person. I'm a perfectionist. So it can be difficult. It's like, oh, wait, I did revise that entire chapter, but I only typed 3 words. How do I count that? But when I was doing it for this book, I sat down and I just started at the beginning and just kept typing till I got to an end. And I just went in linear order, which is not necessarily how I normally write. But I just went from beginning to end and got down something so that I knew where the book would start, or thought I knew where the book would start and where it would end, and just wrote from beginning to end to get along the journey.
And then take us through like the revision process. Like what elements of your writing are you revising? What's catching your eye and making you go, oh, I need to come take another look at this part of the book.
Well, I think when you approach it from a NaNoWriMo perspective, it's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I mean, you basically, great, you got your words down, you have an idea who your characters are and what you think you want them to do, but that's probably all you're really going to keep from a draft like that. Normally, what I'll do is I print all my drafts out on different color paper. So the first draft, I let it be on white paper. But the second draft might be on blue, the third draft might be on pink, the fourth draft might be on yellow, so that it looks different to me every time. I then go through and I read it. In earlier drafts, I just read it in my head and I mark up the manuscript. Okay, you need more here. This isn't believable. Research this aspect because it doesn't, you know nothing about it and you've put it in here. And then in later drafts, I will read it out loud. And actually right now on my second book, I am typing it all back in from scratch. So I have the pages there to read, but I'm typing it all. And that's where I got my, 50 to 100, 500 to 1,000 words an hour number from, probably writing it slower, but going through the manuscript and typing in every single word, because I find that if I'm getting bored typing something in, someone's going to be bored reading it. And that becomes really clear to me when I'm being redundant. Like in this particular second book, I've got 3 chapters that all do the same thing to various degrees. And I think I need to turn it all into one chapter and just put those 3 like events. So in this particular case, I have someone who has Alzheimer's and I'm trying to show it progressing. Mm. So in one, they have already had dessert, but they forgot they had dessert. So they're going to order a second piece of cake. And then in another scene, they end up taking a bus home to an old house where they live, not the house where they live now. And then in the next chapter, they actually get into a car they believe is theirs, but it's not. And it does show the progression, which is great. But at the same time, as I'm writing it, I'm saying, okay, I get it already. And if I get it already, the reader gets it already. So I'll have to figure out, do I keep 2 of those? Do I keep 1? How do I make that work so you can see progression? But not get bored.
Yeah, I guess it's like the whole idea around editing and everything. I've heard authors say you can't edit a blank piece of paper. And I kind of envision a painter, painting on an easel. And you're really not a painter unless there's paint on the canvas. You actually have to put something on there to see the progress. And same for an author. You actually have to start just getting the words out. And as you do that, then you can start working through it.
Exactly. And I think a lot of the mistake that early authors make is they finish a book, which is a huge task. I mean, great, you finished your first draft and that's wonderful. But they look at that and they say, everything's the way I want it to be. I don't want to change it. Well, your first draft is not your book. It's just the ideas that you're going to turn into a book. And you really need to focus on revising them. I heard something yesterday in a revision class I took, which I was really excited about. And that's, is it dead or alive on the page? And if it's just getting you from point A to point B, it's dead. But if it's engaging you, like you said, is it one of those things that are right around the corner in chapter 4, then it's alive. And you keep what's alive, you cut what's dead, and you write more that's alive.
Yeah, I guess I would be like, okay, so I write music, and I think we talked about this before we hit record. If I record something, go in the studio, put my whole heart and soul into this, put it out into the world, and somebody goes, meh, thumbs down, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to quit. I'm not going to write any more music. I'm not going to do this anymore. It hurt my feelings, and I'm done. So you can't do that as an author because you've had to wrestle with this, with your writings. How do you deal with people who sit in an office, kind of look down their nose through their glasses at your work and go, it's not for us, it's not ready, it's not done, it's not good. And you're like, oh, like my soul, you just cut me deeply. How do you deal with that as an author? I'm curious about that.
Well, you start with being thick-skinned, right? And you realize that on one level, not everybody likes everything. As my brother likes to say, that's why Baskin and Robbins has 31 flavors. On the other hand, if everybody doesn't like something about your story, then it's not working. And that's not a reflection of you as a writer. It's a reflection of where your story is right now. And you just have to persevere through that and keep working until it gets to aha, and it starts to make people, enjoy it and want to read more.
At any point while you were writing, did you not like your own story? And you were kind of stuck and go, this is not really what I was hoping we would be heading towards this way. I kind of wanted it to go a different way.
Oh, it definitely took me in different directions, but I wouldn't say I didn't like it.
Okay.
I think when it would surprise me is probably when I liked it most.
Oh.
Because you try to tame it into something. And if you're really, when I was a younger writer, people would say, you want a character-driven story. And I used to write short fiction, very short fiction. And I would think, no, I want a plot-driven story. And I did. And as short fiction, especially microfiction, when you're writing, a paragraph to a page-long story, you're not going to get very deep into a character. And it is going to be plot-driven. But a novel, you're going to be with these characters for 200-300 pages. You better like them. They better bring something to the table. So yeah, I just they would decide they were going to do something different from what I thought they were going to do, that's when they were starting to become full-fledged people on the page.
It's kind of like a really long car trip with another author where you're better getting along with each other because you're kind of trapped in that car together. So you're trapped with your characters and we're on a ride, right? So there we go. Good segue. I love that. So, okay, you work through the author, you work through your characters as an author, and you're building this world. At any point, did you kind of felt like you were being led by your characters at all, where they were kind of communicating to you about maybe some places they wanted to go in the story at all?
A lot of authors say yes, but I can't say yes to that really.
Okay.
I don't dream about my books. I don't get, the sudden inspiration that a lot of people seem to get. I could write them in a way that they had become full-fledged people enough that I would see that they couldn't do what I wanted them to do because it wasn't something that character would do. But it wouldn't be as magical as some people say, where they're writing on a page and all of a sudden the characters are talking to them and telling them, hey, I want to go, live here, or I want to go do that instead. That doesn't really happen for me as much.
Any tips along those lines for an author about making your characters believable so that as a reader, we connect with them better? Any ideas on how we can do that better?
I think so. Especially since that's sort of my weakness. I used to say that I'd have like your paper cutout Bob and he would walk through the story. And it was like, okay, anybody. It could have been anybody walking through the story. So I had to learn how to make those people more believable. And one of the tricks that I employ is I'll think about a character trait of someone I know well, and I will put that character trait into the person, so that at least I have one thing to draw from that I know, oh, they're sarcastic. So whenever they're in, a situation, they're not going to, just take it with grace. They're going to make a sarcastic comment. And once you start doing little things like that, they start to grow as people.
I know when I watch like a television series or a movie, they can transform a typical New York street into 1932 by just throwing some period correct cars and location things that pull you into that time frame and help you to identify the location and make you feel like you're there at the time that we're trying to make you feel, even though it's 2024 and there's like regular cars driving by across the street. They make it look like it's that period of time. Right. How, as an author, can you make the locations feel like identifiable for a reader?
Same way, really. I mean, you have to paint the picture on the page. You're not getting to shoot it with a camera, but you want to, you want to do your research. You want to know what cars were people driving, if there were cars. You want to know what were they wearing? What were they calling the things that they wear? They didn't wear a hat. They wore a derby. or things like that. And you just use that language and create those images on the page so people start to feel that they are where they are. And one of the things I found difficult in the beginning, but I think makes a great transition into time period, is to make sure that you're using the right language.
I was just going to ask you that, like how, because language changes over time, and a word today meant something totally different or didn't exist back then. So you can't write in 2024 speak and bring you back to an earlier time, right?
Right. It's very hard to do that. You have to, for me, what I did is I watched a lot of movies of the time period. People always ask me, how am I able to stay in the 1913 time frame when I'm living in, 2024. And it's really difficult, especially when you have kids, texting you on the cell phone saying, "Hey, mom, can you come get me Starbucks?" So I just had to like turn everything off and teach my family pretty early on that when I'm writing, unless the house is on fire, I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
If there's no blood and there's no fire, figure it out yourself. I'll be out in a couple of hours anyway.
And then you're walking around talking like you're 1913 and your kids are like, "What's up with mom?"
It does happen.
Right? Does it? Slips out once in a while.
It does.
Right? I love it. Okay, so for the reader that's going to pick up your copy of your book as you tour extensively across the U.S., and they're going to come and get a book signed by you at a local event, what's your big hope for the reader as they pick this up for the first time? They're gonna buy your book and be so excited about having this. What's your hope for the reader? What do you want them to experience as they buy your book?
I think I want them to experience what I experienced when I was writing it, which is the reason I write what I write in novel form is I want to learn something about a period in time in America that I wasn't taught. So yes, I was taught about 1913 and a little bit about what was going on, more about what was to come with World War One. But I want people to get an idea of what it was like to be an immigrant at that time. We still have immigration hot buttons. One of the things I like about the discussions I've been in, when people are doing book groups, I try to appear either in person if I can or via Zoom. And so I've had the chance to pop into quite a few, and I love to hear them talk about immigration without the hot buttons of today. So people aren't arguing, they're discussing and they're learning, which is nice. And they're sharing ideas. And I hope that translates out into the real world. But really, I just want people to get lost in a different place, in a different time, and just get to experience, a lifetime that they're not experiencing currently.
I know a lot of us in the Western world, we are immigrants. We can trace back our lineage, and we know who came on what boat and came on what time frame and settled wherever we've settled and landed here in Canada or the US. So we are all immigrant daughters and immigrant sons. So there's something there for all of us. So no matter what your thoughts are currently about immigration, you are probably at one point an immigrant yourself. So I think that's kind of nice that your book breaks that down a little bit and gives us some perspective too.
Yeah, I hope it does.
Yeah.
And if I could tell you a little bit about the Genesis story.
Please.
So as you say that, we're all immigrants. I had traced my family tree back to not the Mayflower, but pretty darn close. And I had grown up in a town in Newton that was half Jewish and half Italian American. Or for the most part, I guess there were those of us splattered in between that didn't fit into one of those two categories. And people were always asking me growing up, "Are you Italian?" And I would say no. And they'd say, "Well, then what are you?" And I'd say, "Oh, I'm English, Irish, and Scottish." And they'd look at me and say, "Are you sure?" Well, I found out in my mid-20s through doing some research for my grandmother that I was in fact Greek, which is the immigrant in my story is Greek. And the way I found it out was my grandmother had been at assisted living, and she was telling me a story about when she was in grammar school, there was a man who used to sit on a swing and watch. She would be on the swing and he would be sitting on a bench watching her. And she always wondered if that was her dad. And it turned out that her father had left when she was 2, but she never knew why. And so through all the research that I was able to do, I was able to put together a nonfiction story for my family of who my great-grandfather was, where he had come from, where he went, and put that together in a nonfiction version. but there were so many pieces that were not able to be found because that was back before the internet. I mean, we couldn't just log on to, 23andMe and find out what was going on. So I did a lot more research. I actually hired someone to help me do some research, but there were still answers, questions left unanswered. So I decided to make them up. And I wrote this book, The Immigrant's Wife, to fill in all the blanks for myself and tell the story of my great-grandfather, although it's almost completely fictionalized. In the book, he does leave for the same reason, and it's a good reason. Back in the day, it was, they left and went and got milk and never came back. And that was not his story. He was not leaving for nefarious reasons. And so to be able to tell that side of the story, I've had a lot of men actually thank me for that, that they don't always just leave their families for, not good reasons. And to get that side of the story told seems to have meant a lot to a lot of men.
I can hear the creaking of the swing. I can picture the person sitting there on the bench watching and just being present. And I can it feels like a beginning of a movie for me, just to kind of get that feeling. And what a story too. What a great genesis to start this whole process. I love it.
Right. It was a lot of fun, but I don't think I would have started as becoming a novelist if it weren't for that story, because I was very happy in my short fiction.
Yeah.
But
amazing. So you're still writing, you're still going forward with your journey as an author. What's between the pages coming up for you?
So my second book is not a continuation. It's an independent novel, but it is the story of an 80-year-old woman who finds out that she has Alzheimer's and was forcibly sterilized in the 1940s. So she has no family to help her take care of herself as she goes down that road. And she's assigned a social worker who she wants nothing to do with because she doesn't trust government agencies and government peoples for obvious reasons. And that person has their own story going on, how they've got their life set up. This is going to happen first in 3 years, then 5 years. And they come together and learn that, being alone isn't the definition of being independent and strong, and that you kind of pick the family you choose to go through life with, and that it's okay to lean on others and come out the other side. So
have you done a lot of research around Alzheimer's as well as you write this?
I did, but I mostly firsthand. My father had Alzheimer's. Yeah. So, and a lot of my family members have. So in that way, it's kind of fun to write because I remember little anecdotes. Like with this first book, actually, I had written, as I mentioned, the nonfiction version, gave it to my dad early on in the Alzheimer's journey. And he was really glad to read it and, was happy what I found out. But later I showed him the fiction version and I wanted to give it to him when he could still read it, which he could, but his memory was already, starting to go a little more. So at one point he asked me about a character in the book that disappears. And he asked me, did that really happen? And I was like, well, no, if it had, we wouldn't be here. Right. So it was a funny moment between the two of us because he didn't remember. But it was very telling of how Alzheimer's can manifest. So it was neat to be able to put that in too.
Yeah. My grandfather had Alzheimer's and he was a very private person. He wasn't very flashy by any means. And he didn't have a lot in life, but if he did, he would give it to you. And I remember visiting him and he would be doing with his hands, he'd be kind of wiping things off the table into his hand down below underneath the table. And he'd be kind of sliding it off the desk. And I'm like, and then he would reach out to me with his hand closed and put what was in his hands. He fell into my hands and pat me on the hands. He was counting out money in his mind to give to me. Right. But he wanted to do it when no one would know. He didn't want anybody to see. So he would do it real carefully and quietly and just very gently give you something for your time, right? And I'm like, wow. He was going back and finding moments, but he would look up at you at some points, call you by name, and you're like, it was like the heavens opened and there's like this, like he actually knows who you are in the moment. And you're like, you want to get every second out of that you can, right? Before he goes back to where he was. So I'm glad you're writing that. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to identify with what you're writing and maybe even find some peace in that as well.
I hope so. And it was interesting when it came to me was when we had to move him into a memory care unit, and we'd go see him all the time, but there would be people there that no one was visiting. And I just thought, how do these people survive with no family around to help them? Because it's a challenging thing to traverse that world, not just of Alzheimer's, but of being in a memory care facility and, all of that. And so that's what started the idea for that second book was what would someone do if they didn't have family?
Right. It's an amazing idea for a book. Do you have a timeline, future date at all for this book?
I would like to. I will tell you that it's in the third draft.
Good.
I had expected to have it to the beta readers already. And actually out to the agents, but I've spent so much time trying to get the publicity for the first book. Because again, if no one knows J.B. Harris in Wisconsin or California, then when J.B. Harris's second book comes out, no one's going to know to look for it, right? So I am doing a lot of publicity, as I said, driving across country, podcasts with people like yourself, and that it's a hard balance. It's really a full-time job. I mean, the people who do it as a full-time job, they have, my admiration. I don't think I would do it for myself again. It's very difficult to do. And it's really infringed on my writing. So I keep saying I'm going to put it aside and finish this other book. And I'm going to have to do that soon. I'm going to have to put my money where my mouth is soon.
I love it. Take us through. I have one more question for you at the end here, JB. But take us through your website quickly. I'm here on the website while we're chatting, but tell us more about your site.
Well, I set my site up actually before the book came out because I wanted to make sure that I had everything I needed, and I wanted to make sure that book came out, right? So a little bit of manifestation there, but it can be found at www.jbharrisbooks.com. And it gives a little more in depth of a genesis story of The Immigrant's Wife. It gives, I think, the first page or two of The Immigrant's Wife. It talks a little bit more about the second book. There's a page on there to contact me, so that anybody who would be interested in getting my newsletter and following the journey across country, they should sign up there. And I'm hoping it's a comprehensive page that will just keep expanding as new books come.
And if you're a bookstore owner and you want to have two amazing authors drop by and you're on the route for this amazing road trip, make sure you reach out as well. Are you going to have all the locations and everything on your event page then on the website as well?
Absolutely. Yep. I've already put up a couple from the stores that I've reached out to and have said yes. Okay. And as we get more locations, I will be putting them up on the event page.
Great. So my last question for you, JB, is all around the ideas of being collaborative with other authors and why that's important. You and Kim are going to do this amazing road trip, and I'm so excited for the two of you. Don't get in any trouble, by the way. But as you do that, I'm just thinking that as authors, it can be a little bit competitive, right? We want our voice to be raised, and we want to get above the noise. But you're doing something unique by working together and collaborating with another author to support each other. I love the idea. For the authors listening, how important do you think it is to be collaborative with other authors? And what's your encouragement to an author who might not have thought about working with a co-author in promoting each other's books and being there for each other? What's the strong advantage to doing what you and Kim are doing?
Well, working with anyone, author or otherwise, to support each other is just, with anyone, but especially with women in publishing, is really important. Kim's book is different from mine. It's kind of a cozy murder mystery, but it's also women's fiction. They're very different books. I loved hers. I read it. I loved hers. And she's read mine, and I believe she liked it. So just because somebody likes one type of book doesn't mean that they're going to not like another. And so being able to share with my audience her book and her audience my book is really helpful. And just friends as well, right? She knows a whole world of people that I don't know, and I know a whole world of people that she doesn't know. And in fact, as you know, but the audience doesn't, that's how I came to be on your podcast. She sent me the link. I watched it and I thought, gee, I want to do that. And I reached out to you and you said, come on, let's do it.
It's amazing. Well, it's going to be a historic trip across the U.S. when the two history writers get together and make history as they drive across and promote each other's books. I love the idea of what you're doing, JB, and I'm so happy that you had time to do this with me. And again, I'm going to be watching and following along on the journey for you and Kim as you put some miles on the car, and there's going to be a lot of laughter and a lot of good times, I think, when the two of you get together and do this trip together. So I'll be watching with great encouragement and excitement for this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And anybody else out there, if you're on the route or even if you're not, as I said, I need to get back to writing. So my, interviews, my articles, all of that is going to take a little bit of a back seat. But what I do want to focus on are book groups. Because one person likes my book, they share it with their 4-person, 5-person, 10-person book group. And now I have, 10 more people who have read my book and can name it. So what I'm doing with book groups is anyone, anywhere who decides that they want to host a book group for my book, just go to my webpage, contact me that way, let me know. And if I can get there in person, because I'm traveling there, you're on our route, or you're nearby me, I will get there in person. If I can't, I will Zoom in. And I'm also offering little hostess gifts to whomever is doing that. And no, it's not the book. I won't do that. It'll be a real little gift. So
there you go.
Please reach out if you're interested in doing a book group with The Immigrant's Wife.
It's a great way to do that. And if you're thinking, Dave, JB, I know somebody who would love this book, then please go ahead, buy the book, send it to them. And as well, leave an amazing review for JB and for Kim when you buy your books, because that means a lot to the author. Get beyond great author, great book. Thank you for your comments. But let's get into why you love this book so much when you leave that review. Because I know when people go to like an online retailer or in-store and they look at those reviews, it can help sway someone towards their next favorite new book and new author. So please use your words carefully when you do your reviews, and support JB and everything she's doing. So JB, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a really fun time. I've enjoyed talking with you.
I love it. Okay, everyone, all the information in the show notes. Head over there, click all the links, and stand out by the road. JB and Kim are coming by. They'll be honking, and you can wave at them as they go by. Make sure you go, and if you're on the route, you got to go check them out. Two great people in a car making history. I love it. Thanks, JB.
Thank you.
Hey, well, thank you for listening. It's a new year, and we're excited to be releasing even more great episodes of Living the Next Chapter, and we want you to come along for the journey. Thank you for being here. If you know of an author that you would love to have featured on the podcast, an author that you enjoy, an author that brings you that excitement that you would just love to hear them interviewed on this podcast, I would love to hear your suggestion for a future guest, and what would be a question or two that you would want us to ask them on your behalf. Go to livinginthenextchapter.com. There's a little speak pipe icon there. You can leave me a voice message. Tell me who should be on the show and give me some question ideas. And I'll use your request and reach out to that author and invite them on and give you full credit for the idea. livinginthenextchapter.com. Would love to hear your suggestion, and thank you for listening. Catch you on the next episode.
Hey there, fellow parent. If you're anything like me, balancing screen time for our kids is a constant struggle. That's why I want to share a little secret with you, KidsPod. It's this amazing app I found that's packed with podcasts just for kids. Imagine stories, learning, and fun, all without the screen. It's been a game changer in our house, keeping my kids engaged and their imaginations running wild. And guess what? It's completely free. So download KidsPod today. Trust me, it's a decision you won't regret.